Well, thank you for being here, for coming, and yes, Angela Haseltine Pozzi, that's my name, and I'm going to get that picture out of there. There you go. I'm the founder of Washed Ashore, which is a nonprofit organization based in Bandon, Oregon. And I started it 9 years ago and was the executive director, artistic director, lead artist, and bottle washer. And now we've actually hired an executive director, which is an amazing thing. And so I just get to be artistic director and lead artist and bottle washer. So yeah, I'm having fun having only 2 titles officially. So what this is going to be about this morning is, if you don't know about Washed Ashore, you're going to learn about what that is. If you do, you're going to hear the details of it. And also a little of a personal story of how I got to be where I am and how that all happened. And so I'm going to sort of take you on that journey, and just hang in there with me. So truly, water has determined the flow of my life. You know, when Caitlin said water's the theme, I'm like, wow, that's actually everything I do is related to water. Because it really makes sense. And I even wear water, you know. So to me, it's been a magnet, and really the ocean was the magnet. Both my grandparents lived on the Oregon coast. I was born in Portland. My parents were born in Portland. We're old Portlanders from 5 generations back. And but I had a set of grandparents on the northern coast and a set on the southern coast. So even if when we moved away from Portland, we always just spent the whole summer going down the coast, up and down the coast. And it was always where I felt like, I should be. Also, that last photo is the southern Oregon coast, which has lots of rocks, and of course all those beautiful creatures attached to the rocks, which makes it even more interesting. And these wonderful creatures of sea anemones are, the things that are nurtured by water in the ocean, along with all the other wonderful animals you have on your tags, which is so much fun for me to read. And then on land, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you love water because it makes it so lush and beautiful to walk your dog. And this is basically the path I walk every morning. I am one of the lucky people who live out in the woods. But I also live on a lake. And that's my dog, Rosie. And then, of course, the fruits of what water gives us. I mean, I grew up with mycologists, so I know all the Latin names of all the mushrooms, and, the Cantharellus saberius there, and the beautiful evergreen huckleberries are what I live for when it comes to be fall. And then water just interacting with the environment. I mean, the beauty of reflections and all of those things. What water does for us. And this photo is water interacting with human things. I happened to be in Washington, D.C., stranded on the tarmac on our plane because there was a severe weather alert. So we had to sit in a plane and taxi back and forth for 2 hours. And I was completely entertained by the raindrops on the window. And I just sat and I was just amazed. I was just so excited. The whole time I was just taking pictures of raindrops. I'm like, yeah, I really do love water. And then water inspires us as artists. This is actually my daughter's work. She's a designer in Portland, and this is just a pen and ink drawing that she does amazing pattern work. And I could just sit and stare at this for hours. And that's just, the inspiration of what water can do for us. And you're going to learn shortly about my mother. This is one of her paintings. She painted water, but she painted lots of things. She was a wonderful artist. And this is the view that I grew up from ages 9 to 18 on Eld Inlet on the Puget Sound in Olympia, Washington. And even when we lived out in the desert, my mother continued to paint water. I think she just needed to. Of course, the details of the sea creatures and the amazing things in the water, those are the things my father related to, and I have also the love of the details of nature. And this is one of my father's work. He did amazing drawings and little tiny detail-y things, and he was fascinated by the microbes of things, the little tiny things. Yes, you just heard that. I had two parents who were artists. One of the luckiest people in the world, and both my parents were married before, had two kids, married each other, and had me. And so they met in art school right here in Portland, Oregon at the Museum Art School. And they actually were the rebels. A lot of times I meet people, my age or younger, so like, I had to rebel from my parents and da-da-da. I'm like, I didn't do that because my parents did that. They are the ones who rebelled. And my father was in line to be the president of the J.E. Haseltine Hardware Corporation after 5 generations. And his inner soul was an artist. And he walked away from a multi-million-dollar job and decided to become an arts administrator. And my mother was on a track to follow her father's footsteps to go to medical school. And she was like, but her art teacher kept saying, you're just so talented. You should just go to art school. And they did. And they're the ones who did that. They broke away from the norms of where they were supposed to head that someone else told them to do. And they said, no, we're going to move away and goodbye to all that. And, I was raised with not a lot of money, but with two parents who absolutely adored the arts and were willing to put their heart and soul into it. So I grew up with my dad running, my mother was a painter, and I was told at a young age that she was a professional artist. Not just an artist, she was a professional artist, and that is absolutely what she was. And we were taught that being an artist, you have to earn that title. You don't just say you're an artist, you have to earn that. And she always had a studio, and she exhibited her work in galleries and in museums, and that was what she did. That was her full-time job. Of course, she also had 5 kids. And so she'd put us to bed, and then she'd work in her studio until 2 a.m. and then get up. She never slept much, about 4 hours a night, and she was fine because she was doing what she loved. And but I always had a place in her studio, and that was a huge gift to me. And I also learned, she would say, gee, I'm trying to get the balance of these colors, and I'm trying to get my eye to travel back through the space, and I need to have this shape over here. So I basically got my basic design knowledge from my mother in her studio. My father was the director of the Salt Lake Art Center and, hung shows and all that. So I also grew up doing that. And of course, what we'd do is we'd go out to galleries and museums for events. So very, very lucky. When they took that job and left, they moved to Utah, which was very far from the Northwest that we all loved. But they found a wonderful community there. But every summer, we would leave the day school let out, and we would travel to the Oregon coast. And we spent the entire summer on the Oregon coast. And this is me when I was 3 years old picking up rocks on the Bandon beach. And we also had a cabin that was built when my mother was 5 years old on this beautiful lake, Laurel Lake. And so we spent the whole summer at this cabin and then at my grandparents' house. And this is now the view from my window. Again, extremely lucky. This is me when I was a little girl. And really, I just spent my whole time when I was in Utah just wishing I was in Oregon. So everyone says, where did you grow up? I always just say Oregon because I never felt like I actually grew up anywhere else. I grew up in the summers. The other thing that both my parents, but especially my mother, always told me is you can do anything you set your mind to. Absolutely anything. And I guess, she really believed that because they did, and I was just given this incredible sense of confidence, and that has fueled me for the rest of, all my life. When she passed away, and I was 40 years old, which was really hard for me because we were very, very close, she kept saying, "Oh, Angie, you should be an artist." And I'm like, "Oh no, you do that. I'm not an artist." But I thought, okay, maybe I should give this a shot. And I was an art teacher, and what I'd done is I'd become an art teacher, and but I was also decided to do my own thing. And so the early work I did, I started about in 2000, and I was actually in the Oregon Biennial in 2003, back when they had the Oregon Biennial. If anyone ever saw that, maybe you'd recognize it. But I had 4 pieces, and it was a really great honor. I actually had some shows, and all my work was based on coral reefs and all made with recycled materials. So all of this is like, sweater sleeves and hair ties and old placemats and dog toys and feather boas and things like that. And when I was doing this, I was married to this wonderful man, Craig Pozzi, who's also an artist, and we were married for 25 years. He taught at Portland State University. I helped start the Buckman Magnet Art School, and then Vancouver School of Arts and Academics, and was really dedicated as an arts educator. And that was really my focus, and I kind of started doing art at the end of that time. But Craig Pozzi was a real critic. He was a great teacher at Portland State. But he looked at my work and he'd say, "Well, it's great, but what's the point?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what's the point? My work sells. Your photographs don't sell like my stuff sells." People like my stuff. It makes them happy. This is great. And he was a documentary photographer, so it was really hard for him to sell stuff. But he was kind of had more of a name than me. But I was like, well, what's that supposed to mean? What's the point? And so it kind of lodged in my head. And then Bruce Gunther, who used to be the curator of the Portland Art Museum, one of the curators of the Portland Art Museum, we got in, interestingly, both Craig and I both got into the Oregon Biennial in 2003. It was a blind jury, and we were the first couple to get in. So it was pretty fun. But the thing was that Bruce Gunther had to come to your studio to make sure you actually got in. So it's like you get in, but then it's like, well, but you might not if he comes and looks at your stuff in person. So, of course, I was absolutely terrified. I was terrified because Bruce Gunther, if you don't know who that is just an amazing speaker, an amazing man. And I looked down from my studio and I see him get out of his car and he gets this big coat. He goes, walks in. I'm like, oh. And, he comes in and he looks around and he's like, well, this is very nice. Yes. It's much smaller than I thought it would be. And I said, but no, this is good work. I like that one. Maybe you could change that. I said, oh yes, I was going to do that. I was going to change that part. And he said, well, and he was amazing. He sat down with me and we had a long talk and critique. And he said, well, you really have the craftsmanship down. You have down your design, but the question is, what are you going to do with the work? I said, well, what do you mean? What am I going to do with the work? Well, you have the potential to do, you could decorate doctor's offices, or you could do something like really intense and gutsy. And I'm like, So sort of like, what is it with these guys, And so, again, those critiques lodged in my head, and I'm like, okay. But he let me in, and I got 4 pieces in, and it was amazing. It was at the Portland Art Museum, and it was a big deal. And then the next year, my husband died. So everything stopped. And if everybody, I have learned, basically hits something really hard in their life at some point, and some of us get a whole lot of those. I was fortunate to not get a lot until I was 47, when I was widowed, and I had a teenage daughter who wasn't doing well with it, and it was pretty horrible. It was a brain tumor that went misdiagnosed, and then he had a massive stroke, and then he was disabled for a year and never could come home, and then died. So I was a mess, and I really decided, okay, I've got to try to figure out what to do with my life. What am I going to do? How do I exist? What does my life mean now? And I tried to do my artwork again and had another show, but I was like, no, you know what I have to do? I have to go to Bandon. I have to go to the ocean. So I moved to Bandon. I was living in Vancouver at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Bandon, and I'm going to walk that beach, and I'm going to try to figure this out, because I'm worth saving. I've got to figure it out. I got to figure out what my life is going to mean and what's my purpose anymore, because it was just really yanked from me. So I basically came to the ocean to heal, but this is what I found. I found an ocean that needed healing. And those beaches that I grew up loving and knowing inside and out were spitting out plastic all over the beach. That's a mosaic line of plastic as far as the eye can see. And I just thought, what are we doing? I hadn't really known about plastic pollution in the ocean. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, well, it must be really bad if it's now little tiny pieces. And so I was like, okay, I better do some research. What's this about? And I kept seeing people walking right over this, but the fact is that I had walked over it. I didn't want to see the garbage on the beach because I was there to heal. I was there for beauty, and I wasn't going to, I was like, I don't want to spend my time looking at garbage. And I finally got to a point after a couple of years where I was like, okay, now what's going on? What is this? And so I did a lot of research. I went online, and but I looked at this kind of scene, and I thought, I need to get those people who are picking up agates and rocks and shells along the shoreline, I need to get them to pick up this stuff. This is what they should be picking up. They're walking right over it. Why are they walking over this? I need to do something to make them see this and do something about it. And in my research, I realized it wasn't just litter. It was coming from all around the ocean. And this is a picture of the five gyres of the ocean. And gyres used to just mean wind currents and wave currents in the ocean that spin around and create kind of like the center of a hurricane in the center where it just kind of sits there. Now, those five gyres are full of garbage. And they just keep getting more and more and more garbage into it. And it spits it out, and it makes it into little tiny bite-sized pieces for animals to eat. And the more I learned about it, I realized that the animals were dying from this plastic pollution. And if you don't know of Chris Jordan's work, it's a real powerful bunch of work. And now Chris Jordan, who is a Seattle photographer and artist, really a wonderful artist up in Seattle, has done a film about the albatross on Midway Atoll, and what's happening is animals are eating this stuff and dying, and because they think it's food. And if you think about it, plastic absorbs smells. That you know, some of those old plastic containers in a refrigerator that you have something sitting in it and you get it out, it still stinks like it. Like, ugh. Well, that's what happens. Plastic absorbs smells. So those plastic pieces are all going to smell like food to animals, and they're eating it. And then this is an albatross chick that could not regurgitate it, and they're just littering Midway Island right now, and in a lot of places, because they can't regurgitate the plastics. And the news is really bad. It's very depressing. If you haven't heard about it, this is one of the biggest news items, is that the UN Environmental Program estimates that by 2050, and now sometimes they're saying almost 2025, it's getting pretty close to that, we're going to have more plastic by weight than fish in the ocean, with our overfishing as well as our other things. And, I'm going to give you a little bit more depressing, and then we'll go up from here. But the other thing is, people say, oh, well, who's doing this? Everyone wants to blame somebody, Sure, there are certain countries that still dump in the ocean, and there's some that use rivers as dumps, but basically our watersheds are carrying plastic all the way out to the ocean all the time. And NOAA, who's been a partner of Wash to Shores at various times, has estimating that 80% of it is coming from land sources. And the less we use on land, the less will end up in the ocean. So let's go up from here. My favorite quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Margaret Mead, and I was born on her birthday, so that made me happy. Also Beethoven's, so I got a lot to live up to. So I decided, okay, so Angela, what have you got that you can work with here? I've been a teacher for 30 years. I had been an artist. I liked community art. I love the ocean. Let's just try to save the ocean. Let's just do that. That'll be a good reason to live. So yeah, decided that's my purpose in life. And I started Wash to Shore. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We do take donations, just to let you know. This is our mission, and it's a long mission statement, but we live and breathe this mission every day. We are there to build and exhibit aesthetically powerful art. Now, we could stop it right there, and that might mean any sculptor who's working is trying to do that. But we are doing it to educate a global audience about plastic pollution specifically in the ocean. It's now considered one ocean, by the way. They're not various oceans because they're all connected. And waterways, and to spark positive changes in consumer habits. So that's a lot to do, but we do it. And I'm proud to say it's working. How do we do it? I say we because it's a huge project. We have about 10 employees now. We use 95% of everything that washes ashore. And in 9 years, we processed over 20 tons of garbage into about 70 works of art. Thank you. And one of the things that when I started this, there's all these facts and figures and all this stuff, and it was so depressing. And I was like, nothing happens if you get depressed and you get apathetic. You just go, okay, let's just party and let's just okay, it's too hard. So I decided, well, we have to get attention. We have to get the attention of people and make them want to learn. And I really want to get the attention of everyone, not just the people who walk into a museum or somebody who already is an environmentalist. I want to get Joe and Betty down the street who've never thought about the plastic straws that they drink every day. I want to get new people, and I had to find a way to do that. So Greta, the great white shark, she's actually interactive. We actually put a boat so that you can actually sit in the boat, but I also do my research and know that I did not want the boat in front of the shark because I don't want it to think that the shark is coming after you. You are simply going, wow, there's a shark behind me when you sit in the boat. And you can put your whole head in the mouth, which a lot of people do. And it's really funny. I've always liked to do art that people can touch, that isn't precious. And that has been something that I've always cared about. I've actually had blind people come to my exhibits in the past when I had did my other work. And I just think it needs to be accessible if you're trying to reach the general public. This is Priscilla the parrotfish at the National Zoo. The universal language of art can reach the heart. And really, what's so great is we're trying to do this without any words. And when we were at the National Zoo in DC, literally people from all around the world are coming by, and to be able to communicate with everything. As you know, the arts are an international language, and that's a great thing. So how does it all begin? Well, it really starts with the beach cleanup because we have to get all the junk. And then we have volunteers constantly going out, People go on their own. Sometimes we organize beach cleanups, but basically, as you know, Oregonians care about the ocean and they care about the beaches, and they've been doing this for a long time, but usually they pick it up and throw it in the garbage cans. So we connect with Solve. If you don't know about Solve, you should. A great organization full of volunteers who are always doing good things to help clean stuff up. But all of this junk was found on the beaches, and it was all once purchased by someone. It's always a good reality check to remember that. What you do, what you buy does make a difference, because people say, well, what's the strangest thing you've ever found on the beach? And I'm like, when you've processed as much as I have, there's nothing that's unusual, and you see everything. Everything that's ever been made ends up probably on the beach. Water, water. There's also water bottles. And this is the kind of water I don't like, is the kind that comes in a bottle, because we get so many water bottles washing ashore. It's unbelievable. They just keep coming. And we've been getting the water bottles from the 2008 Beijing Olympics that actually washed up on our beaches the first 2 years of the project, and then stopped washing up, and then they started washing up just this year again. And that's because the gyre spins around and shoots it out again. So that's our yard where we process our debris. And this is the very simple process of what we do. We design, collect, dump, rinse, wash, rinse, sort, design, soak in vinegar, scrub, rinse, dry, sort, design, drill, cut, wire stitch, screw in, attach, add, book, exhibit, and transport, and install. Then we have to deinstall and bring it back. And of course, most of our work is extremely large. Like, most of our work weighs about a ton. So we have forklifts, flatbed trailers, and all that. Nothing is colored or painted. People always say, oh, how do you get all the bright colors? I said, guess what? Plastic comes in every color and every shape and every size of anything that you've ever wanted. That's why we have the plastic pollution problem. Because we are seduced by the beauty and color and wonderful things that we can get in plastic. We get it all on the beach, and it's simply remarkable that you can get enough to work with over and over and over again. We've made over 70 sculptures, and I'm never for want of anything. I don't have to supplement it with anything from my house or anything from the garbage that's not from the beach. It's all there. That's really sad, but also very exciting as an artist. You can't get too depressed, or else you just can't do your work. This is one of my amazing employees. Daniel's been around for about 7 years, and he's right there scrubbing. He's power washing a bumper that came in, and that bumper right there turned into a salmon. And all of these giant totes, those also washed in, mostly after the Japanese tsunami of 2011. And no, there is no radiation poisoning on any of our pieces, on any of the plastic. It doesn't attach to plastic. It's more of an issue with some of the fish, but we got a lot more large things after the Japanese tsunami, and that changed our way of working. And that was only about 2 years after the tsunami, everything really started coming in. We still get large things that we chop up on bandsaws and such. The core of our work is volunteers, and so we have worked constantly with volunteers from the very beginning, and we have free workshops, and I hope you all come to Bandon and help us build sculptures, because you can do that. You don't have to make an appointment, don't have to pay anything, just walk through our doors, sit down, and spend 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 weeks, whatever you want, to do whatever part that we have going on. And then all those parts of the sculptures come back to me and my staff, and then we put all that stuff together. And over 14,000 volunteers. Those are just the ones who've signed in. This is Flash the Marlin, and one of the things I love the most about, well, there's a lot of things I love about Washed Ashore, but when I get out in the world and I'm giving talks to zoos and aquariums and science centers who don't think of the arts as their main thing, I get to teach them that, you know why this works? Because art is an important language and you have to know how to use it. It's not just by chance and it's not just by talent, but you need to know about the language of the art, just like you do with music to make a beautiful piece of music. You can't just make a bunch of noise and expect everyone to listen to it. You have to know your stuff. And to get some respect for arts education and the importance of the arts is part of what I like to do out there in the world. So basically, I'm in charge of the designing. I do all of the heads and the detail work, but I direct it and help direct the piecework as well. So here's a view of me making the Marlin Eyes. In my studio, I love doing the eyes and trying to get the depth. So I study with photographs and things. And over here, I was trying to they have really amazing iridescence in their lids and such. And so I went out into the yard and I got very excited about this Cinderella Disney ball because I saw it from the outside and I was like, I know if I cut that up, it's going to be all iridescent inside. And it's just the right texture. So I did, and there it was. So that's the outside to the left, and that's the inside when I turn inside out. Here we've got truck tires and oil containers and flip-flops and cans and various things like that. And that's what it ended up like. And then they're all stitched. We never use glue. It's all wired and stitched, and then we use screws, and we do paint the screws. That's about the only painting we do. But as you can see, that's a ball cap and combs and umbrella handles and all kinds of weird stuff. Toilet seats for gills. I do have fun. It's extremely labor intensive. These are hands of our volunteers wire stitching water bottle bottoms into the top of a sea jelly bell. And that's the end result, hanging at the Smithsonian National Zoo at the time. And we involve kids in doing all this. The one thing I love, we've made about 11 sea jellies now. I don't even touch these anymore. Everybody else does them, which is really great. I can just direct that, and it's a real participatory thing for lots of people. Someone had Sea Lion Pup as something that they loved. So I saw it on her tag. I'm like, oh, well, I made a Sea Lion Pup. This is Seymour, the Sea Lion Pup. And, you know, it's funny because when I started this, I wasn't doing animals and representational stuff as an artist beforehand. But I thought, you know, I've got to do stuff that the general public can relate to. And I need to reach inside their hearts. And animals can do that. And so I thought I need to also be the voice of those animals that are being threatened. And I need to get inside their heads and try to get that message through them. And so it's been an interesting adventure as an artist. This is Stella the seahorse. This is the top. This is her crown, or her coronet, I should say. And she's one of my favorite pieces because you can see all those brushes I saved for her. She has shotgun shell wads and Gatorade bottles and all kinds of stuff on her. She was displayed with 4 of her friends at the United Nations Ocean Conference. And that was a really amazing honor. It was even close to the public because there were all these international leaders there. And it was, I think, one of my most satisfying moments when these German scientists were standing around and they were staring at it very seriously. And they, and I said, well, you know, what are you thinking? And he said, this is the way the general public can understand what's happening. It's like, good, that's what we're going for. They don't seem to understand what we're talking about. And I was like, yeah. I was like, wow, this is just different. I was like, yes. That same thing happened to me at the Smithsonian, at the National Zoo. They have a coral propagation lab, and they asked us to create a bleached coral reef out of styrofoam, which is one of the things that we do all the time. And it was right next to their coral propagation lab with all their scientists. And I saw a couple of scientists coming through, and they just were standing there in front of this reef, and they said, people never understand how big reefs are and what it feels like to see a bleached reef. He said, this is really amazing. People are going to get it now. And I said, yeah, that's right. Yay for the arts. The arts can do that, you know? Let's work together with those scientists. And so that's a very satisfying thing for me. We were also invited by the U.S. State Department and John Kerry's office to exhibit at the Our Ocean Conference, and that was also pretty amazing. Didn't get to meet Obama, but he was just in the other room. And Leonardo DiCaprio was there speaking, and he took a picture in front of our parrotfish. Didn't get to meet him either. However, I got to meet John Kerry. And so, and that was pretty neat. He was very appreciative of the work that we're doing as a nonprofit and really congratulated us, and actually spent some time talking with him, which was pretty satisfying. It's also just amazing to me. At the time, also when we were in DC, we got honored. I didn't get to meet this amazing woman, one of my heroes, Judy Woodruff, but we were featured on PBS NewsHour. And really the media, part of why I did this project like this is to get the attention of the media, because you can't resist a very big animal, and it's bright and it's made out of garbage. So we get a lot of media attention, which helps us get that message out. And if our mission is to reach a global audience, we have to use every avenue possible, and so that media is a really important part of who we are. We do have 4 traveling exhibits at this time, and right now we're about to put up 4 new exhibits. We're taking down exhibits, putting them up all around the country. So it's usually in zoos and aquariums, botanical gardens, science centers, occasionally a museum, but those kind of places actually pay for exhibits. Museums don't usually pay for exhibits. But I was determined to be a somewhat self-sustaining nonprofit, because we actually get paid for leasing our shows that travel. And that helps sustain us and keep paying our bills and our salaries. We also do team building workshops occasionally here and there, and that's a really fun thing. This is an organization that hired us to do a salmon. That's Nora the salmon. And each person in their workshop did a little part of it, and then they saw it all come together, and now it visits their conventions every year as part of their, sustainability messaging. So we do a whole variety of animals. There's Cleo the clownfish. There's Lydia the seal. And again, this was when she was at the Como Zoo in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a free zoo, so there were thousands and thousands of kids constantly coming. And we also have written a curriculum to go with it. We got a NOAA grant. I spent 2 years writing an integrated arts and marine debris curriculum that's free online. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is Steve the Weedy Sea Dragon. Real sea dragons are about 18 inches long. He's about 18 feet long and 10 feet tall. And I built him myself, really. That one doesn't have much volunteer work. And it's all made with, from scrap plastics and metals and everything. And yeah, he's really cool. This is Sebastian James, the Tufted Puffin. And Sebastian James, the James part's named after my father. And that's my dad walking through a whalebone ribcage sculpture that we do. We do a lot of interactive things where you can actually walk through sculptures. You can play music with some of our sculptures. This is Mari, named after my mother, the Hawksbill Turtle. And she's a very small piece. This is a piece I did for the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. It's a current ongoing exhibit. It's been there 3 years, and it's they asked me to do a 12-foot long by 4-foot tall by 3-foot wide display case. And I was so nervous about that whole idea of we're doing something for the Smithsonian. I'm like, nobody else is going to do this because I'll just be too nasty to them. I have to do it all myself. So I did that, and it's basically it's a turtle swimming over a coral reef that's bleaching into a bleached coral reef with everything with jellies hanging down. And what's really, really wonderful, and one of the things that I love about our work, is it's not a plug-and-play exhibit. I actually go and I do educational training with all the staff. I spent time with the Smithsonian staff for about 2 days, teaching them about how to work with this as an educational tool and about marine debris. And I do that wherever we bring our exhibit. There's a whole educational component that comes with it. This is Octavia the octopus on display where she was for a little while at the Denver, Colorado Union Station, greeting visitors. So we put our sculptures all kinds of crazy places. She was there for about 6 months and went on to the next place. Where is she now? I think she's at Naples Zoo in Florida right now and about to move to Toronto, Canada. So this is Avery the Bird. Avery has a 24-foot wingspan and 14 feet tall. This is the most amazing thing as an artist, is that because we have 4 traveling exhibits that tour constantly, we don't put our stuff in storage for 9 years. And our exhibits are in places with massive amount of people. 28 million people is what we estimate have actually seen our work in person. As an artist, that's phenomenal. It's like, whoa. And that is pretty exciting. I hopefully that's why we're getting more discussions about plastic pollution. I really think that we've had something to do with that. Again, it's all art with a purpose, so we are really teaching more than reduce, reuse, recycle, which is what I grew up like, oh, this little rhyme of reduce, reuse, recycle, but we never learned about the first 2 words, just the last one, because the plastic industry pretty much wants us to do the recycling part, but if you reduce it, they lose money. If you reuse it, they lose money. So we need to think about that. You know, we need to really go beyond just the recycling part and also refuse plastics, reinvent new ways of packaging and doing things, repurpose whatever you can, find alternatives, and take personal action. One of the things that I love about Wash Ashore, again, is that we're not a political organization, because I didn't ever want to make a line in the sand, so an us and them. I mean, I love the fact that we have Buddhists and Baptists and Republicans and Democrats and rednecks and hippies, and they all sit around the table together and do work. And we don't have enough opportunities to do that in this country, and I rather like that. And so I hope that we spark people to take their own personal action, whatever that could be, if it's, you know, getting angry and going to talk to your legislators, or if it's personal action, go for it. And yes, those are Mickey Mouse ears on that girl. These are our newest installation, is Maggie and Charlotte at Disney's Epcot Center. We just got hired by Disney, and now I have to tell you, my parents didn't allow me to go to Disneyland. It was like they were from the elite class of art. You don't do Disney. And so when we got hired, I'm like, well, I need to know that they're really okay. But the reason they hired us is that they're actually reducing their plastic usage in their parks and on their cruises, and they are making some very strong initiatives about reducing plastics waste. And I was excited about that. And they gave me free rein, and it was pretty amazing. They also paid us to do these and exhibit them, and then we get them back and we can keep putting them in our traveling exhibit. We did that same thing with SeaWorld. So SeaWorld, and that was right before Blackfish came out, so it was sort of like they could have used us, and then we were really glad they didn't, and they didn't let people know we were there. But they did the same thing. They paid us to build the sculptures and rent them, and then they gave them all back to us. And then we have continued to support ourselves with those things. So working with large corporations is a trick. It's real hard, and lots of big contracts you have to go through, and I'll get your lawyers out and all that. But they really treated me well. I mean, I just came back from there 2 weeks ago. They're putting up, this is at Epcot Center, and they're they're using us to actually promote a Disney nature film about penguins, and these are Adelie penguins. And then they actually hired a videographer to come down and watch us, to videotape us making the work, and they're going to edit that on their websites with their trailer for the movie. So we're going to actually have us, and they're promoting us, and they have our signage up, and they're teaching people about Washed Ashore and about plastic pollution. So sure, we'll work with Disney. We're also putting a piece as of Monday morning. It will be at the Animal Kingdom, and it's right, and you walk through the turnstiles, it's going to be right there, and it's a great big 11-foot tall Adelie penguin running across the ice. So basically, how did we get here? Find something that you really love. Find something that touches your soul, and just put everything you have into it, and make it an important part of your life. That's really what happened to me, and it's the whole idea of water and the ocean, and I just decided I'm going to save the ocean, and let's just do it. You know, don't think you can't do something. Just have the confidence to do it. Because when you do that and your heart has been broken, you can come alive again. And I married the one on the left here. They're both cute, but I kind of went for the one on the left, and it's Frank Rocco, who happens to be sitting right here, this wonderful man in my life who brought my heart back to life. And he, begrudgingly, I pulled him into Washed Ashore, and he became our amazing marketing director, and just now retired, which means I don't work 24/7 on Washed Ashore. I actually get, we have some time to do other things. But he really, I have to credit him for getting us to SeaWorld and Disney. Actually, SeaWorld called us on our honeymoon when we were in Amsterdam. So we were even working on our honeymoon. I just want to remind you, in your own personal journeys in your own life, when you have these rough, horrible times, when things seem like, why am I going through hell? As Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, just keep going. And I had a therapist told me that back when I was going through hell. And I kept thinking about that. And I'm like, okay, I'll get through it. And here I am. So it does work. Also, take time to reflect. I think sometimes we just keep ourselves really, really busy because we don't want to reflect about things and things that are hard. And I think that, one of the things I did a lot of journaling. And I forgot to mention, the one thing I did rebel from my parents was they were both 2D artists. I became a 3D artist. But I also just didn't like drawing much. So when I went to do my journaling, I was amazed that I started by drawing. I was like, geez, Angela's drawing, that's amazing. And then I started writing more, and then I wrote and started doing poetry and all kinds of things, and just to get the reflection going. And we forget to give ourselves that time to reflect, because when you give yourself that time, you can reach down deep and find out what you're supposed to be doing. And that's, I think, how I got here. And this is Daisy the polar bear, who's 10 feet tall, sitting on her melting iceberg. And she looks like she's in a fairy tale land. This is at Naples Zoo, and that's the real environment around her. She's in Florida right now. And yeah, polar bear in Florida, yeah, right. It's always amazing sometimes. But really, Washed Ashore also proves that everyone working together can make big, amazing things happen. And really, that's how I feel we can tackle environmental issues, any kind of issues, political, environmental, life, whatever. But if you're all working together towards one thing, anything is possible. I mean, I could not possibly have done all these 70 sculptures by myself. I mean, what I'm doing right now, I'm amazed, but it's only because I have lots of people helping me, and every little tiny part adds up. And very few times in our life do we get evidence that your every action really counts, because you're like, well, how do I know my vote counted? How do I know if this made any difference? How do I know if I don't use a water bottle it'll ever make a difference? But these sculptures couldn't be made unless someone reached down and picked up a piece of garbage off the beach. And somebody else decided to wash it, and someone else drilled a hole in it, and somebody else put a wire through it, and somebody else put a screw through it, and somebody else got it to the exhibit place. And it's just all those actions do add up. So have faith when you're trying to figure out if your actions, yeah, they do. They do make a difference. So just to end on another water scene. I also really believe that everyone can make the world a better place, and I believe that that's the reason we're put here. And that is it for me. Thank you.